Hey up, my name's Rebecca and I'm going to take you on a walk through Walterclough Valley and its surrounding areas. Part of the Shibden Valley in Halifax, West Yorkshire, Walterclough Valley itself is around 2 miles square, and our walk comes in at just over 5 miles. This beautiful bowl of nature and history is teeming with points of interest, which we'll stop at along the way. I've published this route on OS Maps, which is what you see here. I'll link the map in the description for you if you want to try it yourself. We start our walk on Half House Lane, just opposite the Dusty Miller pub on Halifax Road. This turns into Sutcliffe Wood Lane, meaning South Cliff, even though it's actually on the east side of the valley. Here we come to our first stop, the remains of the old Walterclough Pit's aerial flight pulley system. Where we stand now was once cut off by industry. This photo shows the top of the stone column from its Hove Edge view, with Sutcliffe Wood Lane lying beneath. Now Sutcliffe Wood Lane is reopened and all that's left is the tower looming over us with its rusting rails still visible. Coal mines operated in this area from the 1700s, but it was in 1908 that Hipperholme Brickworks Company, Brooks, took over Walterclough Pit. Perhaps taking inspiration from an earlier aerial tramway that ran from Walterclough westwards up to Pierhead in South Aram, in 1915 Brooks constructed this eastward heading aerial flight system. Until the mine's closure in 1969, tubs of coal and fire clay scaled the valley to be poured into waiting railway cars at the top in Hove Edge for their onward journey of processing in Hipperholme. And if rumour is to be believed, the odd cheeky kid also enjoyed an illicit ride or two. In 1952, at the age of 17, Noel Moroney worked as a miner at Walterclough Pit. Let's hear from him as we descend the steps to the side of the column, where we'll see evidence of one of the pulley system's 3 support pylons and its wires snaking through the mud at our feet.
The mine shaft was just a couple of 100 feet deep, so it took only a couple of minutes for the cage to come to rest at the bottom. Once down there we had to walk about 1.5 miles underground to the area I was working at the time, alongside the miner responsible for getting the material out of the face. Our job was done with the help of a boy called a hurrier, who would hurry our full tops to the shaft and return with empty ones over and over throughout the day. I entered the mine at 7 o'clock in the morning, had a 20-minute sandwich break at 10:30, and then worked through to 2:30 in the afternoon. Before going down the mine, we each had to have a brass number that was fastened to our clothing with a piece of string. The idea of this tag was that when we returned, came out of the mine each day to ensure that all the miners who went down all came out again. The mines were very cold in the morning, but as soon as we began work in those confined spaces, the sweat was rolling off in no time. Little black flies were also present in the mine. They were referred to as brattice flies, as they came down with the brattice cloth. The brattice cloth was used to mark the airways and divert the flow of air to where we were working. Yes, it was dirty, claustrophobic and debilitating work. Always the threat of disease, accident or explosion. But the camaraderie was tremendous.
Just before we take a left onto the thin Walterclough Lane, we see a fork in the road to our right. This middle lane is now a private driveway for residential properties, but it used to house a Victorian theme park called Sunnyvale Pleasure Gardens, known locally as Sunny Bunces after the Bunce family who founded it. Sunnyvale Pleasure Gardens opened in 1880 and would draw up to 4,000 patrons a day, with attractions that included thrill rides such as the Flyer and the Glacier, along with a helter-skelter, 2 pleasure lakes, dancing, tea rooms, gardens, swings, donkeys, a miniature railway, pony riding, shows, a merry-go-round, and on the lakes, a steamboat, rowing boats, and even water bicycles. After 66 years of running the attraction, the Bunce family sold the premises in 1946. Shortly after, in 1953, the nearby Hipperholme train station closed and Sunnyvale fell into decline. By the 1960s, the land provided a home for go-karting and stock kart racing, before becoming a squash club in the 1980s.
In 2003, property became private residences, and with the lower lake filled in and only the upper lake remaining, let's head down Walterclough Lane now and see what other surprises await us.
There are a lot of strange tales to be had around Calderdale, from poltergeists to alien abductions, grey ladies to spontaneous human combustion. But the one I want to talk about now is the Black Cat of Halifax. Local folklore author Kai Roberts has spoken of the legend, and in Andy Owens' book Paranormal West Yorkshire, he writes that in 2002 sightings of a beast with yellow eyes were reported in the nearby Cunnery Wood, just off Shibden Hall Road, only around half a mile northwest of here. From 2000 to 2005, a flurry of reports were made to newspapers alleging sightings of a black cat roaming Calderdale and Huddersfield, savaging livestock and terrifying residents.
I knew a man who lived in the farmhouse just beyond this gate, and he told me that he was once opening the gate to go home when, as he did, he saw, just up here, further on along Walterclough Lane, a big cat staring at him before it continued its saunter into the shrub. I wonder why all these broken bricks are here.
Nestled quietly within the valleys, we come across a vast maze of derelict buildings, once home of Allen's Brickworks, which from 1897 used clay dug from the valley to produce glazed bricks. Following a halt in production during World War I, the business bounced back with a focus on creating patented Salfrac fire bricks, which were very popular and used for lining furnaces. In World War II, prisoners of war and refugees helped top up the workforce lost to the war effort. But after the war, the brickworks clay seam dried up, and along with many management and ownership reshuffles, the business closed for good in 1988. The land switched hands a couple of times since then, and is now owned by Blackshaw Holdings.
Well, that was unexpected.
We leave Allen's Brickworks to continue alongside Redbeck towards Shibden Valley, with a view of Sunny Bunce's last remaining relic, Alexandra Lake, also known as Upper Lake, on our right. Onward now towards Dark Lane, which houses the entrance to our next point of interest, a medieval holloway referred to these days as the Magnavia, which formed part of the original route from Halifax to Wakefield, known as Wakefield Gate. To our right we see the recently renovated Lower Place Farm, which the listers of Shibden Hall owned and rented out, and in the foreground, Halifax Civic Trust have installed this fantastic information board all about this Magnavia section of Wakefield Gate. On the Halifax Civic Trust's YouTube channel, they also have an award-winning video called Halifax's Historic Wakefield Gate, and it's a fantastic watch, jam-packed with historical facts and beautiful drone shots. I'll link it in the description. Let's make our way up into the holloway now, but watch yourself, these sets are slippy. I have it on good authority that Halifax is known as the cobble capital of the UK, but in fact our Halifax roads are made up not of cobbles but of sets. Sets are more chiselled in shape, specifically crafted by skilled stonemasons, whereas cobbles are rounded and often pebbles picked out of riverbeds. So now you know. We saw Lower Place Farm there at the bottom, and here we come across the somewhat less renovated original Upper Place Farm, also previously a listed property.
All it needs is a lick of paint. We're eat.
This certified ancient monument is known as a medieval holloway. Holloway named so because centuries of horse hooves have literally hollowed it out. and it's been around since at least the 1100s. Wakefield Gate was the only route eastward from Halifax until 1741, and it's known for being treacherous both then and now. This inclining walk up towards Beacon Hill and Halifax is a difficult but exciting slice of epic historical significance. We emerge from the holloway into the bright sunlight of hilltop scenery viewed from Walterclough Lane, named after a medieval settlement that sat in these fields to our left. We can see for miles up here, Queensbury and Bradford to the north, Huddersfield's Emily Moor Mast to the south, and we're about to go even higher. The land of the Shibden estate rolls downward to our right, and although we're not going to delve into the wealth of interesting history it has to offer in this video, in the description I'll link you to a funny and down-to-earth YouTuber called Grizzly Gaz, who wild camped up at Beacon Hill recently and took in Shibden Hall en route.
Here we have a signpost showing us the way to Beacon Hill. If we were to continue down the hill, we'd end up in Halifax, with sets recently restored by Halifax Civic Trust. But we're going to continue to climb uphill. Off we go!
Once at the very top, we can see a replica of the ancient beacon, which was lit throughout the years as part of a network used to convey news, good, bad and ugly. Good times have been marked here for national events ranging from post-war peace to royal celebrations, and in 1785 it even acted as a jumping-off point for a 20-mile hot air balloon adventure. Bad times have been in its warnings of the 1588 Spanish Armada and of the Napoleonic Wars in the late 1700s. Ugly comes into the equation in relation to the beacon being used to suspend the bodies of those pesky cragged bale coiners in the 1770s.
I love Halifax. No video could ever do this view justice.
Walking south to Bank Top now, we stop to take in a beautiful curved dry stone wall on the Bank Top Marsh Lane T-junction, before continuing down Bank Top to reach our next historic point of interest, Law Hill House.
This is, quite literally, the house that Jack built.
Jack Sharp was the orphan nephew of John Walker Sr., who lived at our upcoming stop, Walterclough Hall, in the 1700s. Despite John Walker Sr. having 4 children, he took Jack under his wing and brought him into the affluent family business, much to the chagrin of his new brothers and sisters. When John Walker Sr. retired and left the district, he gave Jack Walterclough Hall and his business to look after, of which he did not. He gambled and squandered and wrecked and plundered. John Walker Sr.'s eldest son, Richard, had sadly drowned, and so upon John's own death, it was his second eldest son, John Walker Jr., who inherited the hall. And having been left in the hands of Jack Sharp, he found it in a right state. He kicked out Jack in 1771, and following a lengthy court battle, Jack lost everything but his ill-gotten gains, and chose to use those remaining funds to build Law House in 1778, on the hill looking down upon Walterclough Hall, in order to proper irritate John Jr. Jack disappeared at some point in the next decade or so, never to be heard of again. Law House became a ladies' boarding academy, and guess who worked there from 1838 to 1839? None other than Emily Bronte, who, strangely enough, went on to write Wuthering Heights, the story of Heathcliff being weirdly similar to the story of Jack Sharp. We continue down Law Lane and take a left onto Whitley Lane, which takes us back into the valley towards Walterclough Hall. We'll follow this fork in the road right onto Walterclough Lane, but first, let's just take a quick stop. All we see now is a triangular hole, but from 1861 to 1933, this was the site of a pub named Who Could Have Thought It?
Looking at it now, who could have thought it?
Ever loomed down upon by Law House, the legendary Walterclough Hall awaits us. The Hemingway family were first recorded living on the land in 1379, and it stayed that way for nearly 300 years. They sold the hall to William Walker in 1654. William moved to Lightcliffe's Crow Nest, of Sir Titus Salt and Anne Walker fame, and Walker's second son, Abraham, took over. Then, Abraham's second son, John Walker Sr., took over, and after all the drama with Jack Sharp, his second son took over. A lot of second son shenanigans going on. In 1867, the Walkers' Crownest estate was sold at auction, and no one really knows if Walterclough Hall was part of that, but by 1870, 3 Gregory siblings, Elizabeth, Anne and Charles, were running a ladies' boarding school there, housing 18 girls between the ages of 11 and 19. In 1891, one of the sisters was living alone in the hall, and by 1913 it was dilapidated and unoccupied. In the 1960s and 70s, Walterclough Hall became a working farm, which it still is now, with only a hint of the hall's original facade remaining. But in the years preceding its transition from hall to farm, there is another story to tell, and let's recount it as we walk alongside a working quarry to make our way back down the valley. In the 1930s, the local authority took over Walterclough Hall and began to renovate the building. In 1938, John, Joe and Pauline Moroney emigrated from Dublin with their 3 young boys, Brendan, John and Noel. The family took up residence in Walterclough Hall and lived there throughout the Second World War. The couple's youngest son, Noel, is the miner we heard from at the beginning of our walk, and despite the hall being deemed fit for habitation, he remembers it as being large, old, virtually derelict and very run down. We're going to hear from Noel now as he recounts one particularly eventful night there in 1940.
It was overcast, August Saturday evening when I was 4 years old. My mother and father were having a drink at the Duster Miller in Hove Edge, and we children were being looked after by Mrs. Bell, the grandmother of a local history author in Brickhouse called Jimmy Drake. All was normal until suddenly 6 almighty crashes thundered through the valley, along with a tremendous shattering of glass. We'd gone from sleeping to having every single one of our windows blown through with glass hurtling around the room. German bombers had been raiding Liverpool and Manchester when they found themselves chased by British fighter planes. One of the German aircraft still had 6 bombs on board, so to lighten the load, he dropped them over the Walterclough Valley. Our parents returned home to chaos, and the following morning we saw 6 craters in the fields around our house where the bombs had landed. There was shrapnel in and around the craters, and my father insisted that we collected it. We picked it up and filled a couple of wooden cases that we had left over from Ganson's mineral water deliveries. Later that Sunday morning and into the afternoon, thousands of people came from miles around to see where the bombs had dropped, and they were willing to buy these pieces of shrapnel off us as souvenirs of their visit, at the price of an old silver threepenny bit each. Whilst the hall was being repaired and the windows replaced, my family was broken up and we were housed in various hostels and orphanages in the Halifax area, but before long we were all back together once more in the hall, having lived to tell the story, and thanks to my father's quick thinking, even turning a small profit from the event.
Well, come on then, what are you waiting for?
The thrill rides have gone, the pits works and all, barely out left now of Walterclough Hall. This here valley may look tranquil these days, but you'll still need your porridge, it's uphill both ways. Don't forget your wellies and hold on to your hat, as you jump over Red Beck to escape the Black Cat. If you survive Magnavia without slip or blister, then your reward, our kid, is one hell of a vista. Atop the steep vale we pass Jack's looming spite, and Bronte's fingers itching to write. A place of bitterness, revenge and love, where a century on, bombs rained from above. We've seen what remains of Walterclough Hall, a fore quarry and woodland and mazes of walls. Down slippery slope, back up hill and alley, and there you have it, love, Walterclough Valley. At the valley foot on its eastern side once more, we've crossed Red Beck using this stone slab, which seems to be the same one from years ago. We emerge alongside Sutcliffe Woodbottom Farm onto Woodbottom Lane, which joins us up with our starting point of Sutcliffe Wood Lane in Hove Edge. We end our walk on Halifax Road, just opposite the Dusty Miller, the same pub Noel's parents were enjoying a pint or two in back on that memorable night when the bombs fell back in 1940.
Well, thanks for joining me today. Bye, Eck, you've been a cracking walking buddy. Right, the sun's setting, we better get home. Don't want to be in the valleys when night falls, lest we encounter the fabled beast with yellow eyes. Until next time, take care of yourself. See you later.